I'm Greg Tawney. With me, Rich Hartman. Rich, what's going on?
Got to join you for week 6 today, out at the basic handlers course. That was pretty exciting. Did some cool stuff today. You were working on Gunfire acclimation this week. Also working on gas today, which was a little trying for some of the guys. The dogs killed it.
Yeah, the dogs did great. And for you handlers out there, we were using CS, which is apparently the gas of choice nowadays. Not too much on the CM. And just some training tips we want to throw out there. If you guys are training with gas, number one, you should have a gas instructor or somebody that knows what the heck they're doing, because there's some mathematics involved, because you don't want to overuse the gas in certain enclosed environments, because it can be lethal at a certain point. But number one, if you're going to be doing this with dogs, I know a lot of guys want to use smoke, but actually smoke is they're bigger particles. And it can take the dog's breath away. They can have a hard time breathing in smoke. So that would be something you don't want to do. So don't use smoke. Stick to CS. Make sure you have a gas mask. Make sure you have one that fits. And, make sure you're doing it safely and using an instructor.
And I think a big part of the acclimation process isn't necessarily the gas for the dog. We know that the dog can handle that really well. It's definitely the gas for the human, how they interact in that situation. But being able to communicate with your dog with the mask on, letting your dog see you with a mask on. If the first time they see you with a gas mask on is on a deployment with a SWAT team at a house you've never been to, in a situation where everything's a little hectic, now you have a mask on, you're trying to yell through that. Mm-hmm. They're not used to seeing it, and then they're looking up at their handler who's now got their face covered with this foreign object. It might change how your dog perceives things in that situation.
Absolutely. Before we did our training today, we had every handler put the mask on. They ran their dog through a little bit of obedience, and then we had them run through all of the agility. And some of the gas masks come with the voice modulator, the voice box, and some didn't. So the ones that didn't had to speak louder. But definitely do all that, prime that on the front end before you ever deploy your dog in gas. And it's the golden rule. If you haven't trained it, you probably shouldn't be deploying it, right? So just make sure, if you're going to be working with the SWAT team or even around the SWAT team, even if you're on the perimeter, you should, number one, be equipped with a mask, and number two, you should make sure it works, and then number three, make sure your dog's comfortable with you wearing it and giving them commands.
And let's talk about how that deployment went today, how that training went, because I think it's important not to set your decoy up for failure, right? So we have Phil, who obviously our professional decoy. We did not put Phil in the building with the mask for 20 consecutive dog bites, right? So you set it up with a Connex box. The dogs were at one end, Phil's at the other end, outside of the box, just outside of the Connex box. They send the dog in through the smoke, through the gas. Mm-hmm. Come out that back door where Phil's now out in the open, and then he's taking the bite out there. The handlers are going through the smoke, getting a hold of the dog, positive control, outing the dog, and then heeling them back through the gas Connex box and then back out the front door. The benefit of that is Phil's able to work now for close to an hour in a gas environment, but be outside of it so he's not completely inundated, although he was...
Yeah.
He was getting it pretty good.
He felt it, and he was at the threshold of the door. So once the dog went in, then he opened the door on the other end. So once the dog got to him, he could engage, and then the dog was kind of semi-still in the Connex box while Phil was out of it the best we could. Like you said, Rich, the handlers had to move through it, get their dog. And we had a couple of failures as far as equipment, and we had a couple handlers out there sucking up some friggin' gas. And here's what we like to teach, like, shit's going to go wrong, and that's okay, but there's no quit. Like, right. You push forward. You are responsible for that dog. And so your mask comes off, your mask isn't working. It sucks for you, but you got to push forward and get to where your dog is, and then get the dog off the bite, and then get the dog back to the car.
This goes back to a previous training that we've had, and I wasn't even thinking about bringing this up today, but the training that we did a couple months ago where the handlers went in, and their dog was on a bite, and they were blindfolded. They went into the room, they had to find their dog, kind of manipulate the dog, figure out where everything was, have their equipment ready, whether they're using an e-collar or a brake stick, and be able to out their dog without seeing their dog. This is a good application for that situation, right? You go in there, mask fails, you can't see anything, you're in mild panic. Got to go in, find your dog, get a hold of it, be able to out him without seeing everything perfectly, without just giving up on the dog.
Yeah, we had probably 17 handlers go through. 2 of them had mask failures. And just like you said, Rich, if you're training properly, then you should be able to reach where your breaker bar is, where your e-collar, whatever you need, your leash, all that stuff should be accessible, and you should not have to now use your eyes to find it. And if you're using your e-collar, it should already be on the right level, be on continuous, be on the proper settings. So just make sure that you guys are training like you fight, and then have that mentality also in your training that if something goes wrong, you push through, get the mission done.
Absolutely. So that group graduates essentially on Friday. For those of you across the nation that have 10, 12, 14-week basics, we don't. We run a 6-week basic out here, and we have administrations at police departments that would prefer it was 5 or 4 weeks. So you're fighting the good fight to keep it at 6. We wish we had 8, wish we had 10, but we're getting a lot in there at 6 weeks. And as these guys get ready to go out on the street, do you kind of have a big piece of advice that you try and give everybody as they're getting ready to start, their now career as a canine handler?
Yeah, I mean, be prepared for things not to go right. Take all the opportunities you have to continuously train your dog on duty. Continuously grab information that's out there, like listening to podcasts, reaching out to other agencies, like joint training days. Take it seriously. The other thing we did this week, we did the Gunfire acclimation, and if you got through a basic handler class and you didn't do any Gunfire acclimation, shame on that class. I don't think any dog should go through a basic handler class unless they've had some Gunfire acclimation. When we do it, we always do it safely. We always have a 15-foot line. We make sure that there's no way we're going to have any accidents, because in the Northern California area years ago, there was a handler that was told, hey, go practice at the range. Do it on your own. And he went, put his dog down, fired 1 round, looked at the dog looked good, went to fire another round, dog jumped up, killed his own dog. Tragic. And, if you talk to him, he's like, man, it was like the fucking worst thing you could imagine. So when you're out there, always have a safety line on your dog, always have a spotter. Do it slow. We do it from a distance with cover officers shooting first, and then we move cover closer, and then eventually we have the dog where we down them, take a step forward, and we use we use actual Gunfire. We also use the Rex Specs Hearing Dog Pro. Dogs need hearing protection. You will not desensitize a dog to Gunfire by doing it over and over without hearing protection. So, take your time, do it right. But make sure you want to see your dog's reaction of how they're going to react to Gunfire before you go on the street, because if it's an aggressive one, that's something you're going to potentially want to know. And actually, when you're testing dogs, it's actually something good to test for on the front end. But you should not be out there running around with your dog if you have not done that. If your dog's in the back of the car and you haven't exposed them to live Gunfire, something you need to do pronto.
And keep in mind that the ideal situation for your dog when Gunfire happens is neutrality. It is very sexy to throw up a cool video of somebody shooting a gun, the suspect decoy shooting a gun, and the dog going forward and biting that guy. That's a sexy video. We get it. If your dog repeatedly reacts to Gunfire with bite work, at some point you're going to get into a gunfight, and you're going to want your dog to chill out so you can focus on the task at hand, which is not dog work at that point. You need a dog that's neutral, or possibly doesn't even want to engage in that situation. But I sure as hell don't need a dog that is losing his mind to get to the suspect who's trying to kill me with a gun at that point.
Absolutely. And one other thing to that, and you hit the nose on the head. Okay. Neutrality is the key here. So we don't want aggression, which we used to do back in the day, right? Bang, 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 bite. And some dog sports actually promote that a little bit, so it's something you're going to want to be aware of. But we want that neutrality to also just drawing your firearm. So this is something you can do on a regular basis. We've talked about in the past about classical conditioning, and too often we get guys that are drawing the firearm and shooting at the range, drawing the firearm, shooting at the range, drawing the firearm, and now the dog gets very animated and excited, and it's natural for that loud noise to kind of get your dog animated and excited. But now you've linked your draw into it. So every time you draw your gun, now you're getting that physiological change. And guess what? That's not a conscious decision by the dog, and that is very difficult to train out. So get ahead of the curve. Very early on, just get used to drawing your weapon and not firing. Get your dog used to seeing that gun come out of the holster quickly, knowing it's not a toy, and it becomes a nothing to him. Because if the only time you're drawing your firearm quickly with your dog is at the range or in the beginning, you go through a handler class and you're doing a lot of draw, shoot, draw, shoot, draw, shoot, you have just created a big problem that is going to be difficult to train out of later on. So kind of think ahead before you get there.
Yeah, actually, on the neutrality point today, we were doing the gas there, and we were at the range while that was happening. I had a van full of dogs. We flipped the van around to have the open door be towards the range. We just let the door be open. The dogs hung out in the crates, listened to Gunfire, and nothing happened. Threw some food in there and called it good. And for me, I got 45 minutes of really good Gunfire neutrality for all the dogs that we were working. So, yeah, it worked out perfectly.
That's the best way to introduce your dog. Just go to the range, let your department shoot, and stay 45, 50 yards away, and just do some obedience. Teach them it's no big deal.
Absolutely. So congratulations to those guys that are about to graduate this week, and definitely be safe out there. Want to talk about our sponsor, Inukshuk. Recently, we had on the pet side of things, we had a Cane Corso come in, and he was all ribs, and they had done everything in their power to try and get this dog up to weight. We're like, hey, for us, it works to use Inukshuk on the dog. They agreed to it, switched over. Within 2 weeks, the dog had gained 8 pounds. At the end of the 3 weeks, it was 12 pounds heavier. Beautiful, shiny coat, ribs were gone. Everything works perfect. I got a call from Jay Nix this week. He let me know that he actually made the switch over to Inukshuk with some of his dogs and was thrilled, called it a game changer. We know several agencies now where the dogs are thriving on Inukshuk. They're having a great experience with it. We couldn't be happier. Very proud to have them as a sponsor, and super, super proud to be able to feed their food to our dogs, and really happy with the results. So shout out to Inukshuk if you guys are looking for a food for your dog that will make them healthier and have less poop, which is a big deal. Give them a try.
Yeah, and it's not just a few of our agencies now. It's the vast majority of our agencies are feeding it, and I don't have a bad story to tell you about it.
Yeah, I mean,
like the guys that switched to it, everybody's happy with it, and that's rare.
And it goes, like I said, it goes across from police dogs to pet dogs, and we're feeding, across the board. We have typically 50 to 60 pet dogs in the building a month, and a good portion of those people are feeding the Inukshuk and having great responses with it, feeding less poop, the whole thing. It's pretty awesome, like I said, with police canines and pet dogs.
How the wiener dogs doing on it?
They thrive on everything.
There you go. That's all I need to know.
Speaking of pet dogs, you got a cool scenario that we've been working over the last couple of years, but really seeing a lot more of it in all the basics that we have now, and even with the maintenance groups that you're working with. And it involves a police canine handler and dog going to apprehend a suspect who's in possession of a pet dog that is showing some aggression.
Yeah, and so we go back to what gets handlers in trouble. It's our decision-making, right? So the reality-based training aspect of it is something everybody should be doing, and this is just a scenario that we like to run based upon actual events, which most of these reality-based scenarios come from, because they're based on reality. So it doesn't take a genius to figure this out, but so we'll proceed with this. So basically what it is, we have a stuffed dog, and the suspect has a dog. So you're going to contact a suspect, and you're given some information. And the way we unroll this is like, hey, you went to briefing. In briefing, they said that you got information from the last shift, and like, hey, we're looking for our suspect, which is for us always Phil Ryder, our decoy. And the suspect has a warrant for domestic violence. He has a previous history of drugs, and he's got a previous history of resisting arrest. He lives with his parents about 3 blocks from wherever we're training. And usually if we're training in an abandoned school, we go, hey, it's an abandoned school, but you do have one class in session, at the far end, or it's at a park. It's a park and there's people around. And there's a school right down the street. So you kind of, paint that picture of this is a real life environment. And they go, hey, he was last seen in this park or at this school. And, hey, let's go try to pick him up. Why don't you bring your dog and see if we can't get him into custody, because we know he's going to run. And he's got these felony warrants. And it's somebody we're always chasing. And let's go see if we can get him. So when the officer gets there, lo and behold, there's our suspect, Phil Ryder, and he's got this stuffed dog. And as soon as he arrives, Phil's like, hey, stay back. This dog's a pit bull. He's killed other dogs. I'm being completely cooperative, but if I let this dog go, he is going to attack your dog.
And the downside of that, immediately we should be thinking, how much time have we put into making our dogs neutral to other dogs? I think a lot of guys think, hey, I've got this canine and he's a badass. but he's a badass when it comes to people. We've specifically not taught him to fight other dogs. And when he does go to look at other dogs or interact with other dogs in a way that takes his focus off of our job, what are we doing? We're correcting that. We're letting the dog know, hey, leave that alone. Dogs aren't your problem. So now if they interact with each other, you have your dog, which should be like, I'm not fucking with other dogs because I get in trouble for that. And now he's trying to bypass the dog. And you got Phil and his shitty pit bull that want to attack your dog.
How dare you?
And now we're already at a disadvantage because your dog's not thinking fight.
No, like you said, Rich, like from the beginning, we've selected dogs that are specifically not interested in other dogs. Why? Because we have to search backyard to backyard where there's potentially other dogs. And so we don't want them, posturing up on other dogs or being concerned about other dogs. We as a group, we do a ton of obedience around other dogs, again, to further that neutrality. And now your dog is in the mindset of like, I don't need to protect myself from other dogs, like, right? We don't want them to be concerned with that. So in a situation where your dog encounters another dog, a lot of our dogs are really unprepared. They're like, hey, what's up? And I'm looking for a boom. And then the dog fight's on. So you'd be like sending a lamb to slaughter by sending your dog on another dog that has actually been bred and been potentially trained to fight other dogs. You're going to come up on the losing end of that battle.
Yeah, and say you do turn him into a dog fighter. Now you got a dog that's going to, it's all bad. Now you got a dog that's going to be a dog fighter. You're going to have to be dealing with that for the rest of your canine's life. It's just a bad situation. So what kind of situations should we expect the handler to put himself in to get out of this potential dog fight so it doesn't happen?
Sure. So we'll play some of the scenario now, and you'll see some back and forth with the handler and our suspect. And number one, the suspect's cooperative, right? So he's like, hey, I want to surrender. However, I've got this dog. I've got no leash. What are we going to do? So
let's take a look at that.
What are you doing with your dog? Hanging out in the park? Yeah, what do you have in your hand?
Okay, so you can see he's cooperative. So
can you,
what can we do in this
the
situation?
pole
So
there for
you as a
me?
handler, think about what you would do. Now, hopefully you
With the
realize that you have some things
I'll
on
give you a leash.
your person that can probably help this situation, namely potentially a leash, right? So we usually carry a backup leash or take your leash off of your dog and hold your dog by the collar and toss him a leash so that he can secure this dog and then come forward and potentially surrender, right?
Yeah. Let's say he doesn't want to do that. Say he's not interested in that. Do I force my dog into that situation?
Yeah, so as the scenario progresses, you throw the suspect the leash. We have the Phil grabs a leash, hooks up his dog like he's going to hook him up, and then there's a back and forth about, well, what's going to happen with my dog?
Yeah, we can call him in a little bit. So you gotta put him up you gotta put him up there. I have dispatch calling right now.
Okay, get him on speaker, let me go. As soon as they come grab him.
Cool. Hey, go ahead and put him up to the pole. Hey Phil, can you tie it up to the pole there?
No, I don't trust you guys. Man, this is a nice leash. As soon as the family gets here, I'm good.
They're delayed. Hey, can you go ahead and just tie up the dog real quick?
You're such a fucking liar.
That's what the dispatch is telling me. I only go off what they say.
Well, you get Karen on the phone and you tell her to make it happen.
Go ahead and just tie it up, Phil. Come on.
I'll see you guys.
Oh.
Thanks for the
He's
leash.
going.
I needed
He's
it.
going. He's going. He's going. He's going. He's going. He's running. We got a runner. We got a runner. We got a runner. Southbound through the school. Southbound through the school. He's hitting the corner. He's hitting the corner. He's hitting the corner.
The suspect turns and starts walking away with the pit bull. What are we doing? You as handlers that are listening to this, what are you doing right now as the suspect turns to and now starts to pick up his pace away from you and the arrest team?
And I'm gonna throw myself under the bus as I have done in the past.
I hear it
The
coming.
young canine handler, Rich Hartman, would probably try and think that I could weave my dog into that situation and avoid the other. Just optimistic, right? Like, hey, I really want to use my dog in the situation. This bad guy's about to get away. You're not going to outsmart me with your dog. I'm going to solve this problem. I probably would have tried to force my dog into that situation to my dog's detriment. I definitely am not doing that now. It's way too easy for a dog to get into a fight. My dog's not in a situation to fight that dog. My dog's not in a situation to go around that dog. That dog's not going to ignore my dog. There's no way that I'm going to create this canine call where now it's established that it's not.
And you would be within the 75% of handlers that we have in the basic handler course that start to now pursue, and then Phil starts to run. And we've had guys, dude, chase Phil. Like, Phil's gone. He's running with the dog. They're running with their dog. They soon realize how difficult it is to run with your dog, especially when your dog's starting to get ahead of you. We've had handlers fall. It becomes a real unsafe environment, and we've had handlers push the issue, send their dog, at which time Phil takes a bite, then takes the pit bull stuffed dog and starts simulating a dog attack, and they're just going in circles and mayhem. It just becomes crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and this was with a stuffed dog. I mean, imagine if we went and got some shelter dog for Phil to hold on to and he played that whole thing out. And maybe that would make it clearer for people. But I just think in general, canine handlers will want to make most calls a canine call.
Mm-hmm. And as a handler, this is what you need to be thinking. What's the risk and what's the benefit on every single deployment, right? In this situation, there's a lot of risk because now you have a dog fight in front of a suspect, right? You have a suspect that's not searched, and now you've got a potential situation that you've got to rescue your dog. And where's everybody's focus is now on this dog fight. So really it's one of those situations where we need to, there's some things that the handler can do on the front end, right? Number one, and you're going to hear us talk about this a lot, if you guys haven't used a fire extinguisher against a stranger dog, you will be surprised at how effective that is. The smoke coming right out of them, the noise it makes, it scares a lot of dogs. So when you come in contact, like in the very beginning, right, a lot of these things we look back and go, well, what could we have done in the start? Okay, well, you get there, get your perimeter set tight on this guy. Okay, hey, he's got a dog. I'm pulling my dog back because if the suspect lets go of that pit bull, he's generally going to run right past all the other officers and head right for my dog. So I may pull him back. I may pull him out completely at this point. Does he really even need to be out there? And if he's barking and agitating the other dog, and now you have a difficult time communicating with the suspect, and guys, if you're listening to this on the podcast, we've got some video here on YouTube that you might want to check out that just from our trainings. But if you're trying to communicate back and forth and your dog is barking and it's escalating the situation, recognize that. Pull your dog back, get a perimeter set, get a fire extinguisher out there. If you've got another officer cover, say, hey, go grab a fire extinguisher, pull it up. If this dog comes running, boom, hit that fire extinguisher, head it his way, and that could actually have things de-escalate pretty quickly, at least from that aspect. Or designate your cover officers, and we're going to talk about this later. Cover officers should be on the same board that if that dog gets loose, it's their responsibility to deal with that dog, whether they're going to use pepper spray, whether they're going to use taser, a 40, a fire, whatever it is, that's a cover officer responsibility. You are not going to be able to stop that dog and keep your dog away and be able to safely handle that situation. So really the whole idea of this scenario, and if you think about what I said in the beginning, he lives with his parents. You guys deal with him all the time. It's domestic violence warrant. He's got a dope history. This is one where if he gets away, that might not be the worst scenario. The worst scenario might be you trying to fit your dog in where he doesn't belong, creating a dog fight, your dog getting injured, somebody else getting injured, trying to break up the dog fight. It's one of those like live to fight another day. This may be one of those situations, or you know what, do what you would have done if your dog wasn't there.
And keep in mind, and I just want to kind of go a little further on what you said, as a canine handler, not everything's meant for your canine, and your agency is going to start to look to you generally as a dog professional. So you're going to get weird calls like, hey, we got a van full over here and there's a shitty pit bull up in the front yard or in the front seat and it's being kind of crazy. Can you help us deal with this? And the only reason they're asking you to deal with that because they know that you handle a dog and they're hoping that you have a trick up your sleeve to deal with this stranger dog. So sometimes just because you're a canine handler, they're going to expect you to deal with dog situations better than the average officer. And you should be able to deal with those things better than the average officer. So that might mean, hey, it's time for dog to go back to the car. This isn't going to be a dog call. It's going to make things too messy. But I have some things that I can do, and I'm pretty skilled at doing. I know how my way around a fire extinguisher dealing with a dog. I know how to work a catch pole pretty good. Mm-hmm. If need be and this thing gets out of hand, I can throw a slip lead on this dog and potentially take its air away if it does bite somebody. Like I am used to working with a high-speed dog that is aggressive. This is just a different situation where the dog's not a professional, but a lot of the tactics are the same.
Sure.
So be a dog professional, not necessarily just a canine officer in that situation, because you as a handler do have a lot of specific skills that'll come in very useful in that situation.
Yeah. So how to avoid a dog fight? Well, sometimes it goes into the pre-planning, and we're going to talk about that. And sometimes it's your decision making leading up to the event. So in this situation, how do you avoid a dog fight? You don't deploy your dog on somebody that's got an aggressive dog. That's it's not wise. We've seen it, and it's some crazy stuff's happened, and we've had handlers wind up holding back a pit bull while somebody else winds up holding their canine at the end of it. So in this scenario we ran, it was a non-deployment, a de-escalation, and then we documented it in our training records.
What if we're already moving forward into deploying a dog, say it's for a warrant service or just a yard-to-yard search, even tracking, some of those kind of situations, and we turn a corner and now the dog's there. The dog's in the backyard, the dog's on my track, the dog just shows up. What kind of things can I do to prepare for that? And then if I haven't had the opportunity to prepare for that, what can I do now that it's there?
So, and that's a great question, Rich. So here, just going back to the planning stage, right? If you are going to do an op plan and you're going to go do a warrant service, that's some intel that you're going to want to gain on the front end. Hey, does this person have dogs? What kind of dogs do they have? Where are the dogs? And then with you right now, with your guys in briefing and the team that you work with, you should kind of prep them on the front end. Like, hey, if we run into a dog, it's going to be your responsibility. I'm pulling my dog back, and I expect you to stand in front of that dog and deal with that dog, as best you can. But going back to the warrant service, that's information we're going to want to have on the front end. And then we can plan for that, right? Like, hey, we've had animal control come out on the call, and we're going to know if we're going to deal with an animal. They have a catch pole that can come in use. We've already talked about the fire extinguisher, so have that on your op plan as you get up there. Maybe designate somebody to bring that up there with them. We have pepper spray. Be aware where your wind direction is going on that one. I like the taser. It's effective if you got somebody that can land that shot as the dog comes in. So it takes a little bit more skill to land that one. And then you also have 40 millimeter rounds if you use those, or beanbag rounds. All of those things. A lot of times, these things aren't going to really hurt the dog as much as startle and scare them, just like the fire extinguisher. There's no harm to that dog. However, that coming out at them, boom, they'll take off.
I've used it time after time on search warrants, going in to do parole searches, those kind of things. I've never had a dog defeat the fire extinguisher, and I've seen some pretty nasty dogs, upon dealing with that situation, run and spend the rest of the night under a bed in the back of the house. They have no desire. They don't know what that means. It's a scary thing. And not to editorialize too much, but if you're the cop that ends up shooting the household dog,
sure,
because you didn't plan for it, whether you were afraid that the dog was going to bite you or not, whether it was right or whether it was wrong, it's never going to play out well in the media. And we fight the media battle all the time. We can't help that. There's nothing we can do about it.
Well, it sucks. Like, here's the reality is, if you're working a dog, usually you love dogs, right? Like, that's why we got into it, is like, I got the best job in the world. I can do law enforcement. I can find bad guys, and I can work with my dog. Nobody wants to be put in that position where now you have to use deadly force on a dog.
That's doing essentially its job, right? Like, hey, you came to my house.
It's not the dog's fault. He's home minding his own business, and you and your buddies and this other dog show up on his territory. He's like, hey, what's going on here, right? Like if it was your dog and you were home and somebody showed up at your house, right, and in different circumstances, your dog would do the same thing. So I don't want the dog to suffer for that. So we should, like you said, Rich, we need to freaking just make sure we have a plan, get as much intel so we can avoid that. Sometimes it's going to be unavoidable, but sometimes I think we need to just prepare a little bit in case we do run into these dogs.
On a yard-to-yard search, be really cognizant of putting somebody ahead of your search to go and contact the homeowners. This is all basic stuff that I know you guys are learning when you first get your dogs, but it's a good reminder, and it's good to set up your cover officers to kind of start leapfrogging ahead of you, contacting the homeowner, making sure there's not a dog in the backyard, making sure they bring him in, making sure the homeowner stays out of the backyard, all the things that are going to keep your yard-to-yard safe from dealing with homeowners and people that might be back there, as well as other dogs. Any information that I can get as to what's in the backyard, who's in the backyard. It reminds me of a koi pond that I ran into in a backyard that I forgot to ask about. They asked any animals, anything like that. I'm running through the backyard.
Did you tread on them?
I definitely treaded on the koi. I ended up
A koi will bite you.
Yeah.
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, so just getting as much information as you can about the backyard that you're searching, and that'll lead you to that information. Like, oh, hey, yeah, my Labrador is back there. He's kind of nosy. Hey, bring that dog in. We're going to be searching the backyard.
Yeah, Canine Handling 101. What are we asking the homeowners? Hey, number one, stay away from the windows, doors, stay inside. Number two, does anybody have a legal right to be in the backyard? Number three, are there any pets in the backyard? And number four, are there any hazards in the backyard that we need to know about if we go in the back with the dog? And then guess what? I still go in online to the corner and then I pie it to look for myself to see if there's any hazards and to make sure the homeowner didn't like misunderstand what we're saying. And you come around the corner and he's in the backyard. But the dog thing, if you're doing it right, you can contact the homeowners. That should be avoided. Also, when you go to the gate, before you go in there, take that gate, especially if you haven't been able to get a hold of the homeowner, and just rattle the gate a little bit. Like make some noise to see if a dog comes around the corner.
Yeah, last thing you want to do is have your dog find out that situation first. Worst comes to worst, your dog goes in the backyard. We didn't do a good enough job of getting information, and a dog fight ensues.
I'm telling you right now, do not try to use lethal force as far as shooting that dog if he's attached to your dog. So we have had a handler in the past get in this situation where a pit bull grabbed a hold of his dog, and he had a 45 caliber. He shot straight down and did it in a safe manner, as safe as he could. And the round went in, hit the bone of the pit bull, then ricocheted, and then entered his dog. And it could have gone into his leg or somewhere else. It could have gone into his cover's leg or whatever, but it went into his dog's leg. And then he had to do emergency medical, pack the wound as best he could, jump in the back of the car, and had his cover take his dog to the vet, which they saved the dog. However, that's a risk you run once the dogs are now engaged. So I don't recommend using deadly force at that point with a firearm.
No, and from our pet side and dealing with years and years of police dogs, I'll give you some things that I think you can try, and then I'll
shake a rattle can.
If you got a rattle can,
Okay,
give it a go. Give it a go. If two dogs are fighting, I always like to grab the tails and kind of shock them and pull them away from each other. And once they let go, you can kind of give them a swing. Just know that those dogs are likely going to be re-entering that fight unless they're just completely startled and then they take off. So that's a thought, not the best one. A lot of people recommend the finger in the butt. That's a thought. But again, now I have a dog that lets go for a second, but might want to re-enter the fight and feel slightly violated. Yeah. Loud noises, any of those things.
Need counseling. Then you got a whole nother
situation. And the department's in it for years then.
I know I needed it.
You weren't even fighting. The thing that works 100% of the time, and we know it works because it works for police dogs, is taking their air away. So if you can get somebody, and the good thing is when dogs are fighting, they're fighting. So if you can get somebody in there to get a leash, a belt, anything around the other dog's neck and take that air away until the dog is no longer engaged in the fight, that's going to be your 100% solution. The downside of that is it takes a little balls to get in there and wrap up a dog that's fighting with your dog. My preference is going to be to take care of the other dog first as far as getting it off the bite, because my dog has some obedience that I can say, hey, stop, down, after I get the other dog done. Sure. If I take my dog off the bite first, I don't have any way to stop the other dog, and that dog's going to keep aggressing my dog. So I don't want to take my dog out of that fight first. I want to take the suspect dog off that initially.
Yeah, if you still have a hold of the leash, you could also try the fire extinguisher around the other dog. You know, if there's a hose available, right? Like we hear the squirting the dog. But the reality is, if you have a dog that has been trained to fight other dogs, then you're going to have to escalate things, you know, and then taking the air of that dog may be the only way you're going to get that dog off. So what we're trying to say here in this podcast is try to do your best not to get into that situation, because it's like so many training problems. When you get down to a certain point, you go, we don't have a lot of good solutions. There's just like, what's the least bad solution? And I think once another dog is latched onto your dog, we're at that stage where what is the least of the bad situation.
This falls into the category of I sent my dog in the car and now the suspect's driving off with my dog. I sent my dog into the house. The suspect shut the door. My dog's in the house with the suspect. I sent my dog into the backyard. It's now fighting the dog. These are all, oh shit, we need to come up with something pretty quick, but we don't have a really good playbook for that other than don't let it happen in the first place. So it's I think these are weird situations that don't happen a lot, but if you don't plan for them, then you won't have a way to prepare for them. So it's definitely something that you need to think ahead about and hope that it never happens.
Well, it comes down to three things, right? Make good decisions, get intel when you can. If you're going to hit a house on a warrant service, like find out what other animals are there, what other potential dogs are there, and start training your cover. Make sure they know their responsibility is to get in front of you and that dog, that it's not your responsibility to now deal with your dog and the stranger dog, and have plans. Again, we've killed it over and over again, but like a fire extinguisher is, to me, is like one of your best friends dealing with a dog that's charging.
Yep. If you guys go on to Amazon, you can look for the realistic dogs. There's several different breeds. There's labs, there's pit bulls, there's golden retrievers out there. And we try and get the dog that does look pretty realistic so that when your dog sees it and the handler sees it, it doesn't look like a goofy, stuffed toy. We're obviously not using live dogs for obvious purposes of safety. But get this and kind of set the scenario up with your groups and add to it if you can. And send us some video. Let us know how it goes with you guys out there when you're doing this, what your handlers are doing as responses. We want to see what's happening across the nation and how other handlers and agencies are dealing with this.
Yeah. And we'll put up some video so you'll see it here on this podcast, and give us some feedback. And if you've got other options for dealing with these types of things, or you've had some other success in different ways, please share that with us.
Absolutely.
And then we'll put it back out on the podcast, and we'll steal it and put our name on it.
Make it the Tawney program.
The Tawney method. Again, several of those out there that I've stolen. No, just for the betterment of the industry, right? Like, this is why we're sharing this information. And so if you've got something better, please, we are all ears, and we're always looking for better ways to handle things.
Absolutely. And in the meantime,
train hard.
Be safe.